Hi, this is Kaitlyn from Get Ovary It. I just wanted to add a trigger warning to this episode. We're going to be talking about some pretty sensitive subject matter related to abortions. So, just a heads up on that. I also noticed that we misspoke a couple of times during the recording of this episode. So, I think we maybe had some titles wrong or positions wrong. But just take what we're saying with a grain of salt. We were very sleep deprived and or hungover. Don't drink and podcast, kids. Without further ado, here's the episode. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaitlyn.
And I'm Mo.
And this is Team Get Ovary It.
We're an all-female team participating in the greatest motoring adventure on the planet, the Mongol Rally.
We'll be driving 10,000 miles across mountains, deserts, and unknown terrain.
And along the way, we hope to spread our feminist and environmental ideals.
Join us here as we share our stories, thoughts, and interviews as we get ready for the Mongol Rally 2023.
Third time's the charm, I hope. Good day.
Welcome.
Alrighty, so a few weeks ago, most of us woke up to some absolutely horrifying and devastating news. Roe versus Wade had been struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court, effectively ending 50 years of guaranteed abortion rights in the U.S., which is a bunch of bullshit.
It is a bunch of bullshit. I'm not even American, but it's like a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
So, and in certain states, trigger laws snapped into effect, making abortion immediately illegal. There was recently a story circulating through social media of a 10-year-old girl who was raped and became pregnant, who was denied an abortion in her home state. So
Texas.
she then had to travel out of state to receive medical care. I mean, 10 years old.
Yep. Nope, it's fucked up.
That's messed up.
Yeah. So I'm sure we all have heard of the landmark Roe versus Wade and how, thanks to the ruling at the time, it guaranteed the right to abortion. But I think many don't know how that came to be and the history surrounding abortion in the U.S., or even how or why Roe versus Wade was gotten rid of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. I certainly had very little idea. I mean, I'm Canadian, so it's not like we would ever learn that stuff in school.
Well, even in the U.S., we didn't learn about it in school.
Yeah, exactly. But after hearing the news, I wanted to learn more about it. And to that end, I did some research. Now I'm going to present said research in this month's episode, assuming that others were curious about it too.
I mean, I am. I'm very keen to hear what you found out about it and maybe add my own little tidbits here and there as we go along.
Oh, yeah, good idea. So first, we need to know a little bit of history. So this starts in the 60s. So in 1969, Norma McCorvey, who had previously given birth twice and who had given both of those children up for adoption, fell pregnant again and was seeking a legal abortion. At the time, abortion was legal in Texas, but only if the mother's life was in danger, and hers was not. Her other options included a dangerous and expensive back alley abortion or traveling abroad to a country where abortions were allowed. Neither option, of course, were feasible for Norma McCorvey, who was disadvantaged. Eventually, she was referred to Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, two lawyers who were keen on trying to challenge abortion rights. In order to understand why McCorvey was denied a legal abortion in the 1960s and why Coffey and Weddington were so eager to take on her case, we need to delve a little into the history of abortion in the United States. The prior to that time. It's quite surprising.
Yeah.
So, like I said, surprisingly, abortion in the United States was mostly legal in the 19th century. So, like, you could generally get an abortion until like quickening, which is whenever you start to feel the baby moving around. But I guess like at the time, a lot of women would just say, "No, the baby doesn't move," and then like
Right. They would
yeah.
pretend like it's a stillbirth or something like that.
Yeah. Or just like, or they would just lie about like when they felt pregnant and like how far along they were because they couldn't really check it, right?
Right.
So
Yay,
so
technology.
yeah, right. So generally, I mean, abortion was pretty legal.
Mhm.
So however, over the years, more and more restrictions were added. So in 1847, the American Medical Association was established, which benefited doctors by pushing midwives and homeopaths out of the medical market.
Mm,
Not only that, but in the mid to late 1800s, women were beginning to study in universities, many of
mhm,
whom were aiming to study gynecology. So many see the founding of the AMA, or an organization which, at the time, consisted entirely of men, as an
mm.
anti feminist group. So a lot of people are saying that the AMA was mostly founded to like
Keep
push.
women out of the medical field.
Yeah. And then in 1873, Congress passed the Comstock Law, which prohibited the distribution of anything lewd or obscene through the mail. It was mostly meant, yeah, I know. Comstock rules are kind of weird. But it was mostly meant for publications, so books or
Mhm.
images or something like that.
So, like,
Um,
Playboy, shit like that.
I mean, well, I follow this Twitter group. What's her name? Oh, I forget, but she's like a sex historian in the UK,
Oh, okay.
and she often posts like postcards. So like France had this like obsession with these like nudie postcards for a long time. Yeah.
Nice.
It was pretty cool. So I guess it's supposed to be stopping that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Um, but contraceptives were also included in this ban.
Oh, that's where that shit came from to start. Alright.
Yeah. So, at the end of the 1880s, abortions were illegal in most places across the country. It had also been posited that making abortions illegal gained traction in part as a response to increasing immigration.
Mm.
People, mainly men, were worried about the purity of the American population, so they wanted to ensure that as many white babies would be born as possible.
Yay, patriarchy. Bleh.
That's like patriarchy, xenophobia, racism, it's all that
Ooh.
kind of stuff. And in 1896, the Catholic Church banned any and all abortions for its followers.
And yes, Catholic Church priests were sometimes the ones recommending and or giving abortions.
Also, facts, especially to the like the little, people from their what's it called?
Congregation.
Congregation. I was thinking like Congress, and I'm like, that's the wrong word. But yeah,
Their flock, their congregation.
yeah, their flock. Yeah, that they
Sorry.
like, woohoo. Uh, of course. Okay, we know that banning abortions doesn't stop them. So
No.
people seeking abortions in the early 20th century were forced to turn to dubious drugs and tonics or have the procedure performed by unscrupulous doctors. It was a dangerous time for people with uteruses, and many were poisoned, infected, permanently injured, or killed.
Yep.
So, yeah, of course, by 1955, some people had had enough, and a conference was hosted by Planned Parenthood. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Which was founded in 1916. At said conference, quote, conference attendees said that laws should be rewritten to allow doctors greater latitude to provide abortion services, which would improve public health and access to reproductive health care for people of different economic circumstances. End
Mm-hmm.
quote.
Yep. Agree with
Yep.
everything that says.
Right.
Very true.
It
Accurate.
makes very accurate. Makes a lot of sense. That was 1955, everybody. 1955.
Yep.
So, following that, in the 1960s and 70s, there were a lot of high profile abortion cases and reforms. Alaska, Hawaii, Washington, and New York repealed their abortion bans entirely. Even
Nice.
clergymen in some places were calling for the repeal of some abortion bans. It was this backdrop of changing attitudes around abortion that set the stage for Roe versus Wade.
And surprisingly, it was the Republicans who were pushing the
Yeah.
the getting rid of the anti-abortion laws at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, because I from what I understand from listening to podcasts and stuff is that
Mhm.
originally Republicans were the liberals and the Democrats were the conservatives.
Is that how it was? Yeah,
Mm.
it may have been that, but I think it's just more of like they focused on the general public health benefits of it
Uh,
all, as
right.
they're like conservative, saving money overall by not having random people dying all the
Mhm.
time. And
I mean that makes sense, and like it's a providing abortions means a lesser burden to like foster care system and stuff like that.
Mhm,
Mm.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense.
sure does. Republicans who may or may not be listening, cough, cough. Sorry.
I mean, no, not just Republicans. I mean, like,
I know, just anybody in general. I'm just
yeah,
giving them shit because I can.
fair. So in 1970, Coffey and Weddington filed a lawsuit against Henry Wade, who was a district attorney of Dallas County at the time. They not only filed on behalf of McCorvey, who was going under the pseudonym Jane Roe,
Hmm.
but on behalf of all people who, quote, might become pregnant and want to consider all options, end quote. For 3 years, the duo battled in the courts all the way to the top. Their main argument for abortion was that the current laws banning abortion were in violation of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees that the state cannot interfere in individuals' right to privacy, which includes making decisions about one's own body.
Hmm.
Mm, which makes a lot of sense. So they're basically arguing that, having these abortion bans is unconstitutional, which
Right.
I know how much you Americans love your constitution.
Right. It is the foundation of our society and everything that we believe.
Exactly. So others were also included as plaintiffs in the lawsuit. So there was a married couple where the wife was suffering from some kind of, is a little bit vague, but it seemed like she had some kind of mental or emotional disorder, and she was
Mm,
advised to stop taking birth control. But
as a way to
also,
help
yeah, but also not to get pregnant by her doctor. So her doctor was like, stop taking your birth control, but also don't get pregnant. But she's married. So like
that.
so like what is she gonna do? Um
Right.
yeah. And then another plaintiff was the doctor that McCorvey tried to get an abortion from originally.
Hmm.
But he refused to perform the abortion because he had pending charges against him for performing two previous abortions.
So he didn't want to potentially get slapped with a third charge.
Exactly, yeah. So,
Hmm.
like, I think, like, in all the cases, like, the charges were, like, about whether or not the patient's life was really in danger,
Hmm.
right? Because those were the laws at the time. It's kinda interesting. And all argued, so, like, the couple, Jane Roe slash McCorvey
The
and
doctor.
the doctor argued that the criminal code statutes were too vague and in violation of many amendments, the 14th in particular.
Hmm.
In the middle of all this, McCorvey gave birth to a baby girl and put her up for adoption. And like the story of, for all of you who are listening, like I'm not going to go into it in this episode, but like her life, McCorvey's life, and including like her children, the ones that she gave up for adoption, yeah, Norma, um, it's pretty interesting.
Mm.
And yeah, it's a bit of a wild ride. So I recommend reading into that on your own when you have time. It's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
But anyway, what do we say? So in 1973, the Supreme Court struck down the Texas law banning abortion 7-2.
Nice.
So it quite strongly, citing that a
Yep.
woman's right to an abortion was implicit in the right of privacy protected by the 14th Amendment. Basically, any laws that strictly banned abortion would be unconstitutional. So the court divided the just and like another thing that happened because of this is like I I got like really upset with somebody because on somebody commented on one of my Facebook posts recently that
Hmm.
yeah, like abortions were unregulated.
What?
Yeah,
They're.
I
Oh
mean
my
he was a
god.
man, so
Of
like
course he was. Of course he
he
was.
said
They don't know fucking. They don't know jack diddly about anything that has to do with not their bodies.
yeah, I mean, and like therein lies the problem. Uh, so, so at this
Mm.
time, so the Roe versus Wade, part of the
Hmm.
ruling was like, yes, these bans are unconstitutional, but they also set out like some guidelines on,
Hmm.
when abortions uh, need interference by the state or like whenever the states can set restrictions on abortion.
Right.
So they divided up the gestation period into 3 trimesters.
Hmm.
And they said, for the stage prior to approximately the end of the first trimester, the abortion decision and its effectuation must be left to the medical judgment of the pregnant woman's attending physician.
Hmm.
So the doctor decides whether they want to perform an abortion or not.
Or not for
Yeah,
the
or
first
not.
3 months.
So there's like I mean there's room for like doctors if it's against their moral code or whatever to deny the abortion.
Yep.
So
And the woman
it's
is free to seek out a doctor elsewhere.
exactly. Exactly. Then second stipulation, For the stage subsequent to approximately the end of the first trimester, the state, in promoting its interest in the health of the mother, may, if it chooses, regulate the abortion procedure in ways that are reasonably related to maternal health. So, like, in that case,
Mhm,
like, most of the states I had bans on that, like, after the first trimester, like, after 21 weeks or so,
mhm.
then it's, like, only abortions will be carried out if the mother's life is in danger. That's, like, pretty
Right.
much what happened. And then for the stage subsequent to viability, so the after the second trimester, like, usually in that time period, the fetus is viable if they're born
Mhm.
prematurely. So at
Right.
that point, it's considered to be its own sort of separate entity. It's like its own life. So
Mhm.
the state, in promoting its interest in the potentiality of human life, may, if it chooses, regulate and even prescribe abortion, except where it is necessary and appropriate medical judgment for the preservation of the life or health of the mother.
Right.
So kind of again,
So
mostly
basically
banned.
mostly bans
Mm,
unless there is a medical issue that is going to cause harm to the mother, and therefore they have to abort for some
yeah,
reason.
yeah. But in most cases, it's banned. Which
Yep.
I think, like, I'm
It's
pro-choice,
that
but
that is reasonable. I'm
reasonable.
willing to work with that.
So this decision was upheld for nearly 50 years and was even solidified during a few high-profile cases like Planned Parenthood of Southern Pennsylvania versus Casey in 1992. And then,
Mhm.
like, when Roe versus Wade is cited, usually this case is also cited because it was kind of like
It backed it up.
it backed it up, yeah. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. But Planned Parenthood of Southern Pennsylvania versus Casey was also a bit problematic, and I'll tell you
Mm.
why. So, that same case also allowed the state to impose stricter rules on abortion without banning it outright, opening the door for other states to do the same. So they
Ah.
added a lot of stipulations. So, like, Planned Parenthood was trying to argue that a lot of the things that they said were also unconstitutional because they were trying to enact like a bunch of different restrictions, and I think like everything except one was accepted.
Mhm.
Yeah, only one part was struck down, which I think had to do with it was like a 15-week abortion ban or something.
Yeah.
So that part was struck down, but I think other stuff like having to wait 24 hours and having to
Mhm.
listen to the fetal heartbeat and blah blah blah,
Mhm.
like that kind of stuff passed.
All
So
all of the kind of semi-coercive stuff passed.
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So in 2018, the Center for Reproductive Rights, which is one of the charities that we
Yay!
support,
Hell yeah.
um, yeah, filed a suit on behalf of Jackson's Women's Health Organization, which was the last remaining abortion clinic in the state of Mississippi. They were trying to block the state's seemingly unconstitutional ban on abortion after 15 weeks. Citing Roe versus Wade, the federal district court struck down the ban. The decision was upheld in 2019 by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit for the same reason. However, so like we're getting closer to kind of what's happening now. So,
Mhm.
however, in 2020, the state of Mississippi appealed to the Supreme Court and asked the judges to review the ban. The current and very conservative panel of Supreme Court judges ruled 6-3 to uphold the Mississippi ban, stating that there was no constitutional guarantee to abortion, effectively striking down Americans' rights to an abortion.
Yep. In
Yep.
Mississippi at the time.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Like, this is what happened. So, like, whenever they say like they
Yeah.
struck down Roe versus Wade, it's
Oh,
because of
this is the case.
this is the
Okay.
case. Yeah.
This is the case that they reviewed again and struck it down with.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, so like in the two lower courts,
It
it
was
it
upheld.
it was upheld, but then like finally when it got to the Supreme Court judges said like, "Oh no, it's not." And 6-3. So pretty
It was
strong. It wasn't really it's not that close either,
yeah,
which is
it was pretty close to what
problematic.
the original ruling was, but on the opposite,
Opposite direction. Yeah.
right? Because when they put it in place originally,
Mm,
it was 7-2.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like
Ugh.
after 50 years we've kind of did a flip-flop and we've totally switched.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. And like there's a bunch of stuff too cuz I mean, this is happening after the election of Donald Trump, and like Donald Trump enacted like the global gag order, and he's very anti-abortion, which is kind of ironic considering it's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I think, and I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he at one point was actually pro-abortion, but like for
Mi-
political reasons, I think he changed his tune.
yes,
But
and that is the case for a lot of politicians.
yeah.
And if you so like I was watching Netflix cuz like
Mhm.
I do, cuz I
Yeah.
just, that's my way to relax. But they have a documentary on there that they did called Reversing Roe,
Okay.
and it kind of documents the journey of the Republican Party and the uh active political parties in from like the early 1960s
Mhm.
all the way up until I think 2018 or 2019,
Mhm.
and watching the progress of the Republican Party strategically going after abortion rights, and how
Mm.
they um, were very tactful
Mhm.
in the way that they approached getting people to have an emotional reaction and
Mm.
get on board with the pro-life idea, and
Mm.
promoting that idea and pushing that idea and pushing uh, different laws, new bans strategically in various states to try and get it up to the Supreme Court where they could push
Mm.
their ideas again at the Supreme Court to potentially get it overturned.
Yeah,
Which
and I think in some cases too, like I was reading about I forget what it is, but I think it was one of the Supreme Court justices or like one of the like defense lawyers or whatever. Anyway, in one of these cases, but the language that they were using to argue their point was
Mhm,
like really strong, like you were
mhm,
saying, like trying to create that emotional. And they're like, oh, like during abortion, the baby is being ripped limb from limb, and then new scientific advancements
mhm.
now give us a better understanding of like how if the fetus has feelings or not, like if they can actually feel that pain. And it's like, what are you talking
Right.
about?
So
Because we
and
know
go
like,
ahead.
we know, like, at the stage where the fetus has, discernible limbs, basically, it's like it's late in in the gestation period, and at that
Right.
point, like, abortion is pretty much banned anyway, so it's like, what why how is this even an argument?
Right. Well, and the reason why they're doing it is because they're trying to create that emotional reaction, and they focus so in the documentary
Mm,
and in some of the reading I had done to follow up with the documentary, they were saying that a lot of that uh they made up a lot of stuff through their own rhetoric about like it had to do with like the ripping the baby limb from limb, and
yeah,
there was like a medical doctor who went to testify at the Supreme Court,
mhm,
and she's like, "Look, most of the abortions that we're dealing with are first trimester abortions. They're
yeah,
happening within the first 21 weeks. It is not a what you would consider a child or a human being at that point. It's
mm,
still just a cluster of cells multiplying, working its way that direction, but it
mm,
hasn't happened yet." And what they're talking about is like the 1% of the 1% of abortions that happen, and the only reason that those ones happen so late is again because they're
mm,
medically necessary to save the mother.
right,
But that's what the party has focused on to create their rhetoric, because it creates fear. It
mm,
creates that guttural reaction of, "Oh my god, that's terrible." Reaction that people will have to a child being hurt or a child being killed in general. So they're trying to build on that, but apply it to an unborn child,
mm,
which is powerful, and they were very smart to do that. The unfortunate part of that is that they're basically taking away the ability for us to have autonomy over what happens to our bodies, especially in the US where we preach freedom of speech,
well,
freedom of choice,
that's
freedom
yeah,
this, freedom that. It's like, okay, well, where's my freedom to choose what I can do or don't do with my body?
yeah, that's and, like, it's kind of ironic because like, a lot of people who are anti-vax are also, like, anti-abortion, and I'm like,
And it just, my biggest issue with
mm,
the overturn of Roe versus Wade is that they didn't listen to actual medical factual information, and they went
yeah.
with the rhetoric instead.
Well, that's like, because I think what are they saying now? They're saying that like if you have oh god, what is it called? Like an implantation of the fetus
The
into like
IU.
the fallopian tubes.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Y
yeah.
y
Shit.
there's a word for it, but, like, it's like, it implants outside of the womb, but, like, I mean, like, you're gonna die, like, it's not that's not a good
Mhm.
time for anybody.
No.
But I think like, a mandate now that, like, doctors have to try to reimplant the embryo into the uterus. It's medically impossible.
Mhm.
Reimplantation does not work, and it's just,
Nope.
like, unnecessarily invasive and dumb. So
It's also damaging to the mother, like,
yeah.
you have to go through a medical procedure to have it removed in the first place, so, 1, you don't die, and then
Uh-huh.
2, you're being forced to go through another medical procedure because it's mandated,
Mm,
just so that they can attempt to re-fertilize you with an egg that was already fertilized in the wrong area that they've
mm,
had to remove anyways,
yeah.
which, as you've said, is medically impossible.
Mm,
So basically, you're just putting this woman through more harm and grief and more medical procedures that she
mm,
doesn't necessarily need just to satisfy your agenda, your political agenda of, oh, well, we can't give you an abortion, so we can do this for you instead.
yeah, and, like, the wild thing is I think, like, that dude who was, like, trying to pass that mandate, somebody was like, "Did you even, like, Google like, did you even do any research about this? Like, consult with a medical professional?" He's like, "Well, how would I know it's not possible? I'm not a doctor." And it's like, "Bro, it's a
That's why
10-second Google search, honestly." Like
a 10-second Google search or it's a fucking conversation with a goddamn doctor. Like,
Yeah.
do your fucking job, bro. Like
Well, at
that.
this
Yeah, that's ugh.
Yeah, at this point,
Go ahead.
it's like it's kinda like you were saying, it's sort of it's like ignorance, but it's also on purpose in order to, like, get what they want passed,
Yeah,
basically.
they're purposefully ignoring information so that
Mhm.
they can and they're making shit up too. Like,
Yeah.
the term that they were using, I which for the life of me I cannot remember,
Mhm.
but they made up a term to talk about how the baby is removed during the 3rd trimester, which is inaccurate, but it's like it's not a medical term, but they use it
Oh,
as if it
okay.
were a medical term in some of their uh bands that they were trying to push. And then it just
Mm.
became a term that everybody used.
I gotta watch this documentary, it sounds really interesting.
It's really interesting and it's very logically laid out and it has a lot of factual evidence from both sides. Like they have
Okay.
Republicans who are talking about, why they did what they're doing and their opinions, their thoughts on the process, and then they have a medical doctor who was involved in the court case, the Supreme Court case most recently. And they follow her around and then they talk to other doctors and they look at the impact that it's had on both the Republican Party and the people who fall into that group, whether they're extreme right or they're just more center right or what have you.
Mhm.
And the impact it's had on the various communities that are dealing with, because they have abortion centers, dealing with these issues more viscerally and in their face
That's pretty
because of
hardcore.
all the protests in front of the centers and the doctors who work at the
Yeah.
centers.
Ugh. And, like, I was during my reading, like, I heard some things about, like, certain clinics, like, getting bombed,
Mhm.
basically. Like,
Mhm.
there's no need
Clinics have
for
been
that.
bombed, doctors have been killed.
Yeah.
Like
Just
they have followed doctors home and or killed them in their off time because they knew who they were, they knew where where they lived and things like that.
is yeah, okay, and, like, that's so ironic. It's just like, life is precious, but
I'm gonna go kill
I'm
this
gonna kill
doctor
this
who's telling
guy.
me other people. Yep.
Ah! Anyway.
Yep. The hypocrisy is so wonderful.
Bruh.
Hmm.
So, anyway, I'm sure we've all heard the following argument from at least one person. So, like, quote, "Abortions haven't been made illegal. The states can simply just decide on their own what they want to do," end quote. Which is like one of my coworkers said that to me the other day, but like it technically it's correct, but it also like really bothers me at the same time
Yep.
because it's like, the US is a big country. So if abortions are banned in one state and the states around it, as is often the case, it would make it impossible for disadvantaged people to seek one. Like getting
Right.
time off work, paying for transportation, and paying for the
Yep.
procedure will become
Yep.
impossible for many Americans.
And then considering gas prices now as
Oh, yeah.
well,
It's even
makes it even
worse.
worse. Like you're paying if you're in like I'm gonna take California for an example just because their gas prices are insanely high. They're like there's no I just talked to a coworker who lives in California and she said that there's nowhere in California that gas is less than 6.50 a gallon.
Wow, it's expensive.
You're paying at least 6.50 a gallon and that's cheap in California right now,
Mm,
which is insane. But taking that gas price for an example,
mhm,
which is the extreme, but like having to pay that much to potentially have to travel 300 or 400 miles one way to get to a state that's going to allow abortion depending on where you live,
mm,
and then travel back and or potentially have to take an airplane to try and get to that state to go to a
mm.
clinic.
Well, it's not only that, because like, I was thinking about this too, because those rules of, like, you have to have, like, a 24-hour waiting period and blah, blah,
Mhm,
blah. Like, I mean, you would have to, like, go there for a
mhm,
couple of days also and then
mhm.
come back. Like, it's just yikes.
Yep. It's not an easy thing to do, and like I so I used to the clinic that I used to go to for my lady checkups
Mhm.
was a Planned Parenthood and in
Yeah.
Washington State, and there were occasionally people who were outside protesting with these grotesque photos of like stock images of like fetuses,
Uh-huh.
and they're like, "You're killing your baby," and I'm like, "I'm just getting a checkup. Fuck you." Like, why are you yelling at me? I'm literally just going to have a medically necessary yearly physical. I'm not getting an abortion, but you're treating me as if I'm a social pariah because I happen to visit a Planned Parenthood which has reasonable prices for their medical services that they give.
Yeah, my friend used to get her paps at Planned Parenthood all the time. And like, that's kind of my other point. So, right, banning abortions will cause abortion clinics to disappear, and abortions aren't the only services offered. So, like,
Mhm,
STI testing, pre and postnatal care, contraceptive care, sexual health checkups, like,
mhm,
like women's checkups, like these services will likely all be gone. And like you said, like, those places usually offer those services at a reasonable price or for free. So,
mhm,
like, who's going to be disproportionately affected? It's going to be people of color, even like people in the LGBTQ plus community,
mhm.
and like people who are
Low
at or below
income.
the poverty line. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
it
it's
is
it's it's not just a war on
terrifying.
abortions, it's also like a class thing too.
Yeah, it well, yeah, and they've done a really good job of focusing on the emotional side of it and
Mhm.
keeping it about the abortion and not letting the rhetoric change to talk about also who is being affected by it.
Right.
You don't really ever hear about that in the news when they talk about, oh, the abortion ban, blah 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 blah. It's and this clinic closed down, blah 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 blah. It doesn't talk about who's being affected. It just
Mm,
talks about what's happening, and that's it.
yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to change is we need to start recognizing who's being affected and what are they doing to help those people get their doctor's appointments
Mm.
and make sure that they're receiving the medical care that they need.
That's kind of like when my coworker, when he said that, I was like, look, listen, like, this is a whole slew of medical care that now is going to be denied to like millions and millions of people. Like, that's
Mhm.
like, I don't understand how that couldn't be considered like unconstitutional.
Right.
Oh, it's crazy. So then the question is, how did this happen? Right? Especially when the majority of Americans support the right to choose. So, like, after Roe versus Wade was struck down, or maybe
Hmm.
even before, like, Americans were polled, and it seems the majority actually support abortion rights. So, to answer that, I want to take a closer look at the three Supreme Court judges who voted to uphold Roe versus Wade and the six who voted against it.
Okay.
So I did like a little research, just through Wikipedia or whatever, on all of the Supreme Court judges. One of whom now is retired, and he was replaced by Ketanji Brown Jackson, which is good. But most people are still on the Supreme Court, so it's more or less like the structure, I guess, between like liberal leaning Supreme Court judges and conservative judges hasn't changed. It's still like this. So 4. So there's 3 Supreme Court judges that were for upholding Roe v. Wade. Well, 3 to 4. It's kind of weird. So there's Stephen G. Breyer,
Mhm.
who he's now retired, and he was replaced by Ketanji. So he is 83 years old. He's from San Francisco.
Mhm.
He was nominated by Bill Clinton in
Mm.
1994. And his main arguments were that the judiciary should include public participation and opinion in governmental laws. And
Mhm.
he consistently struck down anti abortion laws throughout his career.
Nice.
So he was a pretty good guy. Then next, there's Sonia Sotomayor. So she's 68 years old. She's from New York City, New York. She was nominated by Barack Obama in 2009,
Mhm.
and she grew up in the Bronx.
Nice.
She is actually her story is very interesting. So she grew up in the Bronx, like they were very poor when they were kids. She fought a lot of crime in the
Eh,
1970s in New York, which was
okay.
yeah, that was like an insane time for New York, and she
Uh-huh.
was she was in the thick of it. And she's the first woman of color and the first Latinx justice on the Supreme Court.
Nice.
Yeah, she's
Props.
really she's really cool. And then there was Elena Coggin. So,
Mhm.
or there is Elena Coggin. She's 62. She's also from New York. She was also nominated by Barack Obama in 2010. So in 1997, she wrote a memo urging Clinton to support a ban on late term abortions.
Mhm.
So she's actually like, even though she's sort of left leaning, she's not really left. She's kind of a swing vote. She can go either way.
Right.
But she was the first woman to become the Solicitor General. That's pretty cool. But she often agrees with Breyer, and she really disagrees most of the time with Alito. And Alito is like the big problem.
Mm.
So those were the 3 that voted in favor of Planned Parenthood, basically. So
Right.
they wanted to uphold like Roe v. Wade.
Mhm.
And you can kind of see like through their nomination, like who nominated them: liberal presidents, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and even like where they grew up: New York, very
San
liberal
Francisco.
state, and California, very liberal state.
Yep.
So those are those kinds of trends. Now to talk about the people who were against. First, I want to talk about the Chief Justice, John Roberts. So he's 67. He's from Buffalo, New York. So he's from New York.
Mm. All
He
right.
was nominated by George W. Bush in 2005.
Okay.
Okay. And during this one, he voted on the side of Mississippi. So he thought that Mississippi should be able to ban abortion after 15 weeks, but he also said that Roe v. Wade should not be struck down. He
Mhm.
said, quote, "It was a settled law of the land," end quote. So we keep that, but Mississippi should be able to make that restriction.
And they were talking about after 15 weeks.
Yeah, ban after 15 weeks.
So they're creeping into the first trimester, but they haven't completely gotten rid of the first trimester, which is what they were trying to do in Texas. They were trying to ban anything after 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
most women don't even realize that they're pregnant until about 6 weeks, if not a little later,
Yeah,
because
it's a pretty small window, but I mean, at least it's a window. And I guess like for him, so like I read some more, and then in 1999 he did a radio interview where he said that state laws are more attuned to what's happening in that area. So it seems that he like
Mm,
supports like the states deciding for themselves what to do. Like it's more about that and less about abortion.
right.
I think it's just
And
kind of
that's fine. Like I understand them trying to leave it up to the states because the US is such a large country. It's
mm,
hard to make sweeping declarations and have it apply evenly across the country cuz what works in New York won't necessarily work in rural Kansas.
yeah, and that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
Um,
So like I understand that and I'm not mad about it. I'm just
but I think like medical care is like a little bit different though.
right.
Like everybody
Right.
needs medical care.
Right.
Yeah.
It there are some things where I feel like a sweeping declaration could be useful,
Yeah.
i.e., processes and procedures for like how to deal with like, oh, I don't know, COVID, for example. Like,
Sure.
how do we track these things? If you
Yeah.
had a sweeping declaration, it would be a lot easier because then everybody would know what to fucking do.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Canada was like that too. Like the provinces, like some provinces did a great job, other ones were like an absolute nightmare.
right.
Yeah. No, that's that
But
those kinds of things are problems. Oh, for sure. So So here's the other 5. So first one, Samuel Alito, problem person. So he's 72. He's from Trenton, New Jersey. He was nominated by George W. Bush in 2006.
Hmm.
He he replaced Sandra Day O'Connor. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first female Supreme Court judge.
Yeah.
He was considered, or he is considered, one of the most conservative justices, and he said that Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. So he's always been against Roe v. Wade.
Row.
Yeah, so of course he would like vote to
Try to
strike it
strike it
down.
down as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Then next we have Clarence Thomas. Yeah. He's 74. He's from Pinpoint, Georgia.
Okay.
Georgia. He was nominated by George H.W. Bush in
Mhm.
1991. So it's kind of interesting. So he was the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in 1982.
Okay.
So Alito is one of the most conservative. Clarence is the most conservative.
Oh, which is
Yeah.
surprising considering the fact that he was in charge of equal opportunity employment, which is
Right.
strange, but all right.
Yeah. It's a little bit strange. And okay, and then while he was the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, he sexually harassed Anita Hill, who was working as his advisor at the time, and it kind of created some like controversy when he was like nominated and like for his
Hmm.
appointment. They had a hearing about it. Um and Joe Biden was participating, and Joe Biden was a piece of garbage. So
Mm.
if you like, again,
Hey,
listeners,
man.
I'm not going to go into Alita Hill, but like if you don't know about it, I really suggest reading into it.
Yep. I Politicians in general flip
Mm,
flop on like a dime depending on what they think is what their constituents want.
yeah. Well,
So.
yeah, and I mean, like, yeah, Joe Biden is kind of a problem. Like, he also flip flopped on like busing,
Hmm.
in like the 1960s, 70s,
Yep.
whenever that was. Like, so
70s, 80s.
yeah, I don't remember. Should
It
look
was
at that.
70s, 80s because that's civil rights era.
That was a big problem. But
Yep.
anyway, Clarence Thomas is a big piece of garbage. And then, so next one, Neil Gorsuch. I don't know.
Gorsuch. Gorsuch. Yeah.
Gorsuch, whatever his name is. So he's 54. He's from Denver, Colorado. He was nominated by Donald Trump.
There's three of
Hey,
those
in
because I
20s.
think he elected three of them.
Yes, there's 3. So this is one of 3. So he notes he is an originalist. There's a couple of them that are originalists, which they kind of just want to follow the original wording of the Constitution and not really take any
Oh,
liberties with it.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, and like maybe they don't want like to change anything, so it's kind of interesting. He
Hmm.
supported the Gulf War.
Mm,
Uh
okay.
Interestingly enough, with this guy, he attends a church that is friendly to the LGBTQ plus community.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All right. I mean,
it's just different. It's just different. That was a little tidbit that I found out that it was a little bit unexpected, and I was like, oh. And then here's scumbag number 2, Brett Kavanaugh.
hmm.
Uh-huh. So he's
Hmm.
57. He's from Washington, D.C. He was nominated by Donald
Trump.
Trump in 2018. Um, and this is like the most ironic thing I found out about him. He recommended Bill Clinton's impeachment when he was working under Ken Starr.
Okay.
Right. Yep. Uh-huh. And then he's considered to be a moderate, surprisingly. So he's not
Hmm.
like an ultra conservative. Okay, and then of course Christine Blasey Ford and other women accused him of sexual harassment and assault. He became a senator with like a 50 to 48 vote.
So barely.
Barely, yeah. But apparently in June, which I did not hear about at all, somebody tried to assassinate him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's shocking.
it is shocking.
I definitely do not recommend or condone assassinating political
No,
figures.
don't do that.
Just like let's not do that. Like
Yeah.
let's use words, people. We're not for.
Yeah. So, well, and like, so what happened was the would-be assassin like went to his house, and then I guess like upon reaching the house, he had some kind of change of heart or revelation or whatever, or he got scared, who knows. And he like called 911 on himself and gave himself up. It's like
Okay.
no shots were fired or anything, like,
Well,
but like, yeah.
that's good. But also
Yeah.
like just go home at that point.
Well,
Unless you were having like a mental break
Like,
and
probably.
that was what was causing that's what caused you to go there in the first place, and you finally became lucid, and you're just like, "Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I
And
can't
and if
trust myself."
like, allegedly, like, the reason what drove this person to the assassination attempt is because of the, like, Roe v. Wade stuff.
Mm,
Mm. And, like, Brett Kavanaugh's involvement in it. It's very interesting.
hmm.
But they didn't go through with it in the end. And then finally we have Amy Coney Barrett. So she's 50. She's from New Orleans, Louisiana. She was also nominated by guess who?
Ba-ba-da-da, the Cheeto. I mean, Trump. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, but she was nominated in 2020. Um,
Mhm,
so she also was very close. So she was voted into the Senate 52 to 48.
mhm,
So all Democrats and even one Republican were against her appointment.
mhm.
Very
Well,
interesting.
they were pushing her appointment, like, right there before he left office.
That's that yeah.
They were, like, rushing that shit is what they were doing.
Yeah, 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 and she replaced, Ruth Bader Ginsburg too,
Mhm,
which is kind of unfortunate, but so it was yeah, controversial because she was nominated only 38 days before the election, which many considered to be too close to the line. Senate
mhm.
Republicans refused to hold hearings for Merrick Garland in 2016 because it was an election year. So,
Right.
like, Barack Obama? Yeah, Obama had, nominated Merrick Garland, who's now serving some other post, I can't really remember.
Mhm.
But, like, the Republicans were like, "No, no, you can't do that. It's too close to the
It's an
election."
election year. You can't do that. What is
But
wrong with
then
you?
but then, like, they're trying to nominate a conservative person, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's fine."
Right, exactly. And that's kind of like their whole strategic,
Yeah.
you know, their game plan. Their game plan was to change the Supreme Court from a mostly Democratic court to a
Mm,
mostly conservative court so that they could get the result that they were after,
yeah.
which was striking down or, imposing more restrictions on Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. And it's just like well, and, like, that and, like, a bunch of other stuff too, because like, now that Roe v. Wade is gone, it opens up, like, a whole other can of worms, like, it's
Yep,
gonna be
they
like
could they could try and go after gay marriage rights
yeah,
and laws. They could go after you know, equal opportunity and things like that, or equal
that's also true.
employment things like in like those kinds of laws and regulations that are in place. Like
Yep.
they could go after literally anything they wanted and try and get it struck down.
Yeah. I think I saw something, I forget which judge it is, but like one of the judges ruled in this case one time. It was like a free speech case and
Mm,
he basically said that it was okay for a business to say that they weren't going to serve Jews as long as like the like Jewish people could go somewhere else and get the service.
really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I guess like the idea
So Jesus fucking Christ! Like oh
y-
my god.
yeah, that's like one of the
Ugh.
supreme I forget which one it is, but it's one of the Supreme
Ugh.
Court judges like ruled that in like a previous case in the past. It, like
That's just so wrong on so many levels. Like
yeah.
really, just really.
Oof. It's a big
God, they need to
oof.
go back to kindergarten and learn how to share.
I mean, that's not a bad idea. We'll do like a what
Oh,
is it, like Billy Madison kind of thing to send them back to grade school.
yep. Go back to grade school, relearn some basic human,
Decency.
decency, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
So as you can see, currently the Supreme Court is majority conservative. There is only really one true liberal, while the other two that voted to maintain Roe v. Wade are considered to be more moderate leaning. Federal Supreme Court justices serve life terms, or they can choose to retire earlier. Many
Yep.
of the justices nominated by Trump are quite young and will remain on the court for, I don't know, like 20, 30 more years.
Yep.
So, yeah, if we want to get our right to abortion back, we're going to have to be patient and smart. Supreme Court justices are nominated by the president and then voted in by the Senate. So there are two senators from each state, which are elected by the people. It's
Hmm.
important to participate in Senate elections because
Yes.
senators vote on important laws and also, as previously stated, confirm Supreme Court appointments. So,
Yep.
together, we need to educate ourselves on our state's senators, who they are, and what they're likely to support and dissent on, and then
Yep.
vote. The same
Yep.
goes for presidential elections. I know it sounds daunting because, like, me too. I also don't want to I wish things were simpler, but unfortunately, that's not the case.
Right.
Um, Yeah, so it's kind of daunting, time consuming, but this is what needs to be done to ensure our rights. Most of all, we need to suss out those politicians who would ratify the right of abortion into the Constitution so this kind of thing
Mhm.
doesn't happen again. I know, like, a
Right.
lot of people, they're just like, oh, we can't change the Constitution,
You
but like,
can. It's happened. Fuck
it's a
that.
piece of paper anyway.
It's a piece of paper that was written over 250 years ago,
Mm,
and I would like to point out there have been amendments to it already. So yeah, you can fucking change it.
yeah, it's pretty
Also,
wild.
society, our values and our thoughts have
Mm.
changed from 250 years ago when it was a group of white guys being like, "Oh no, we don't have representation in England, the country that we came from." i.e. they were immigrants.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah, yeah.
so we're going to make our own country and we're going to make our own constitution and laws that we think are fair because we
Mm.
don't like to be prosecuted for our religious beliefs anymore. La di da di da, America.
That's pretty wild. Well, even at the time, like, technology changes too. Like, at the time
Yeah.
of Roe v. Wade, it was, I think, stated, like, in the court proceedings that, now abortions are relatively safe, especially, like,
Mhm.
in the first trimester. So there
Yep.
really is no reason to kind of, like, deny somebody that
Medical
right,
treatment.
that
Yeah.
medical treatment, yeah. And
It's
then
safer than sticking a coat hanger up your
oh
hoo-ha,
god, don't do
which is
that.
what a lot of women do and or using potentially unsterilized equipment from a backdoor doctor to
Oh,
get an
yeah.
abortion done,
Well,
which is what we've gone
sepsis.
back to.
Yeah. No,
Which is
it's
what we've gone back to. We've gone back to people resorting to drastic measures to try and keep themselves from having to either feed a mouth that they have no way of feasibly feeding because they can
mm,
barely feed themselves,
mhm.
to dealing with the shame from the community of having gotten pregnant in the first place. Like, if our communities and our country was more accepting of people being pregnant and being single mothers, and there wasn't
And there
as
was
much stigma and
support for those
shame,
mothers, yeah.
yeah, it would be a different story. But there's so much shame and stigmas against those people, against those women, that it's just like, what else do you expect them to do?
Mhm.
You've backed them into a corner. What do you expect them to do?
If conservatives could wait 50 years for Roe v. Wade to be struck down, we can match their grit and surpass their determination to get what we want.
Oh, hell yeah.
We can do it!
It's just a matter of buckling down, paying
Yeah,
attention,
yeah.
and educating the next generation and continuing to educate the 18-year-olds as they're coming out of high school and being
Mm,
able to vote and being like, look, I know it's boring. I know you don't want to hear about how it's your constitutional right, but like, it is so important for you to pay attention and
mhm,
take just a little bit of time, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes of your time that you're sitting there scrolling on your phone anyways. Go
mm,
fucking to a Wikipedia page. Look up who's running for Senate that year in your state. Take the time to look at what have they voted for in the past? What have they supported in the past? Who is this person? And educate yourself. Don't just be
mm.
like, "Oh, I'm only going to look at the Democrats and the Republicans." Fucking look at the Independent Party. Look at the Green Party. There
Yeah.
are other political parties out there. Don't just fall into the trap that so many have, that there's only two. There's not.
Yeah, there's other options, and then
There are
also
other options.
and you can build, like, I mean, you can build a party from the ground up, like,
Hell yeah.
because, like, I mean, a lot of people who, like, participate in municipal government even, like, become
Mhm.
mayors or whatever, later move on to become senators, you know?
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, if possible, like, try to pay attention even from those early stages of somebody's political
Mhm.
career and support them in that way.
Yeah. It's a quick Google search,
Yeah.
people. Like, Google each of the senators. Take fucking 10 minutes out of your day of
Yeah.
your scrolling on Facebook, scrolling on Instagram, looking at Snapchat. Like, take 10 minutes
Mm,
and look the person up and make an educated decision. And please look at things that are factual, not dark web
nonsense.
nonsense,
Yeah.
please. Anyways,
Yeah. Time to
time
time
to
to
wrap it
go.
up for today, guys. All right,
All
so that's all we got for today, and I really hope you enjoyed learning about abortion and Roe versus Wade and some of the history behind it, as well as the individuals who are responsible for it being struck down. I know Caitlin probably enjoyed doing some of the research, and I enjoyed kind of looking into it myself. It was not necessarily a fun topic to research, but it was one that I do think is necessary.
Well said. So also, if you liked this episode, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, etc. on whatever platform you're listening to this on.
You can also support us by becoming a Patreon. Patrons have access to exclusive content, AMAs, and more. Proceeds will be donated to the Center for Reproductive Rights and Cool Earth. All links are in the description.
And the Center of Reproductive Rights is still out there fighting the good fight, trying to get our rights back. So now more than ever, donations are important. Yeah, we got to support. So check out our website to read our sources and accompanying blog post on this episode.
And that's it for this month. So we'll see you next month.
All right, see you then. Bye.
Bye. That's it for today, folks.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
And as always, please support this work by subscribing and donating to our cause at www.teamgetoveryit.com.
Donors get access to specific content like stickers, t-shirts, and postcards from our journey.
You can donate for as little as $5 and the benefits build from there.
Go to our website for more info.
Or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Team Get Over It.
Thanks for listening.
And catch us next time on Get Over It.
Let us begin.
All right, we're beginning, folks. In 3, 2. That was me.
Yeah, too. Yeah, I'm also pretty tired because I spent like the last 2 nights drinking with people. So no, you're right.
Hold back a couple of the words I was going to use. I was like, nope, that's not appropriate. Fuck, what was one of the terms?
That's not a good time for anybody. Give me a hot minute. What's her name? The new one.
I'm like, on the Gulf War. Knock it up. Give us more oil.
That's basically what happened. Okay.
All right.
Interesting.